Hello everyone again, it's Mr. Brown reading his the favourite book from his childhood, Emil and the Detectives. I seem to stumble over that every day. Chapter 3. Chapter 3 is called Alone with a Stranger. So sit back, lie down, relax, close your eyes. If you want to, put away any other distractions and just enjoy the story. Chapter 3, Alone with a Stranger. As the train started, Emil said good afternoon to the people in the carriage and raised his cap politely. "Excuse me, but is that seat taken?" he inquired, though he could see that no one was sitting there. A fat woman had taken off her left shoe because it pinched her toes, and was holding her toe out and twiddling the toes to ease them. "Boys aren't often as polite as that nowadays," she remarked to the man sitting next to her, who wheezed at every breath. "Things were very different when I was young." Emil had heard that sort of remark before, and he took no notice of it now. Some people were always lamenting the good old days, as though nothing was as good as it used to be, even the air, which, according to them, used to be much cleaner. They were not lying exactly, nor telling the truth. Generally, they were just discontented, and thought anything was better than what they had got at the moment. Emil felt into his right pocket, and was not satisfied until he heard the envelope crackle, though the other passengers looked honest enough and not in the least like thieves or murderers. On the other side of the wheezy man there was a woman crocheting a shawl, and in the window seat next to Emil was a man in a bowler hat reading a newspaper. This man suddenly put down his paper and brought out a slab of chocolate out of his pocket. "Well, young man," he said, holding it out to Emil, "would you like some of this?" "Oh, thank you," Emil answered. Then, remembering his manners, he took off his cap, bowed, and said, "Emil Tischbein's my name." The other passengers smiled, and the man in the bowler hat solemnly raised it and replied, "Glad to make your acquaintance. My name is Grunteis." The large woman who had taken off her shoe asked Emil, "Has Mr. Kerschel still got the draper's shop at Neustadt?" "Oh, yes," said Emil. "Do you know him? He's just bought the land it stands on." "Oh, is that so? Well, tell him that Mrs. Jacob from Gross Grunau was asking after him." "But I'm on my way to Berlin now," Emil explained. "That's all right. It will do when you get home," said Mrs. Jacob, wiggling her toes again, and she laughed so that the hat slipped down over one eye. "So, you're going to Berlin, are you?" asked Mr. Grunteis. "Yes, my grandmother's coming to meet me, and she'll be waiting by the flower store at the Frederick Street station," Emil replied, and he quietly patted his jacket again. The packet crackled, so all was well. "Have you been to Berlin before?" Mr. Grunteis asked. "No," said Emil. "You're in for some surprises, then. Ever seen buildings 100 stories high? No? I thought as much, but you will in Berlin. They had to fasten the roofs to the sky so they won't blow away. Then, if you're in a terrible hurry to get anywhere, you can go to the nearest post office and they'll pack you in a box and shoot you through a tube to the post office in the district you want to go to. Yes, and if you haven't got any money, you can go to the bank and get £50 in exchange for your brains. Of course, you can't live long without your brains. Only a day or two, and to get it back you'll have to pay the bank £60. The doctors too, they've got some marvellous cures." "It sounds to me as though you must have left your own brain at the bank last time you were there," remarked the wheezy man, "stuffing the boy with such nonsense." Mrs. Jacob stopped wiggling her toes, wondering what would happen next, and the other woman looked up from her crochet. The man in the bowler hat was annoyed, all right, and soon a fierce argument was going on, but Emil didn't care one way or the other. He took out his sandwiches, though it wasn't very long since he'd had his dinner, and he was halfway through the third, and there was a sausage in it, when the train drew in at a big station. Emil didn't see the name of it, and he couldn't make out what the porter was shouting up and down the platform, but the wheezy man, the woman with the crochet, and Mrs. Jacob all got out. Mrs. Jacob nearly got left behind because she had great difficulty in getting her shoe on again. "Remember me to Mr. Kerschel's," she said to Emil as she finally scrambled out, and he nodded. After that he and the man in the bowler hat were left alone in the carriage, and Emil began to feel rather anxious. There was something queer about that man. One moment he was giving you chocolate, the next he was trying to make a fool of you with a lot of nonsense. Emil would have liked to check his money again, just to pass the time, but he didn't care to risk it alone with Mr. Grunteyes as soon as the train had moved off. So as soon as the train moved off, he went into the adjoining toilet and took the envelope out of his pocket. The money was still there, and he counted it, and he wondered what he could do to make it safer, and he had a good idea. He remembered he had a pin in the lapel of his jacket. He took it out and stuck it right through the envelope and the 3 notes, and pinned them to the pocket through the lining of his jacket. There, he thought, nothing can possibly happen to it now, and he went back to the compartment. Mr. Grunteyes had settled himself comfortably in a corner seat and appeared to be asleep, so Emil didn't have to talk to him. He was able to look out of the window, which he liked. Trees, windmills, meadows, factories, cows, and waving farm workers went whirling by as though they were set on a huge gramophone record, but watching them got wearisome after a while. Mr. Grunteyes went on sleeping, and actually snoring. Emil would have liked to get up and walk up and down the carriage, but was afraid that might waken him, and he didn't want to do that. He leaned back in his seat opposite the man and had a good look at him. It was funny that he kept his hat on all the time, Emil thought. He had a long face with a small black moustache and a lot of wrinkles around his mouth. His ears were thin and stuck out from his head. Whoa! Emil jumped. He had nearly fallen asleep, and that would never do. He wished someone else would get in so that he did not have to be alone with Bowler Hat, but no one did, though the train stopped at several stations. It was still only 4 o'clock, so there was more than 2 hours to go before they reached Berlin. He tried pinching his legs, as that always helped him to keep awake during history lessons at school. Then he began to wonder what his cousin Pony looked like now, for he couldn't remember her face at all. He only knew that when Grandma and Aunt Martha had brought her to Neustadt, a long time ago, Pony had wanted to fight him. Of course, he had refused. She was no more than a flyweight then, to his welterweight, so it would have been quite unfair, and he had told her so. Why, if he had given her one of his uppercuts, they'd have had to scrape what was left of her off the wall. But she had kept on and on about it until her mother got tired of it and made her stop. Whoa! He was nodding again and had nearly rolled off the seat. He pinched himself and dug his fingers into his legs until he was sure that they must be black and blue, but it didn't seem to do a bit of good. He tried counting the buttons on the seat opposite. Counted one way, there were 24. Counted the other, he could not make more than 23. He leaned back, wondering why that was, and so fell sound asleep. So that's the end of chapter 3. And chapter 4, which I'll read tomorrow for you, is called A Wild Nightmare. So that's the first 3 chapters of Emil. You're getting to know the story. I think you can probably imagine what might happen in the next chapter. I'm not going to tell you. You think about it and discuss it perhaps with your family, and I'll read the next chapter tomorrow for you to see on the channel. Okay, well, take care, stay safe, help your family, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye.